things you could do. Bury it in a tin can in the backyard, for instance. But idle money may in time depreciate. Or you could spend it on a couple of nights out a week with the wife. This seems like a lot of fun. But with this kind of life, you'd depreciate. So why not put your money to work?
Put my money to work?
That's right, Mr. Finchley. You can own a share of American business. There are over 1,200 companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Companies which employ more than 11 million people, produce half of all the goods made in America, and pay about half the
Welcome back to Ask the Compound, where we didn't get a single question about the U.S. election. Can you believe it? No, I'm kidding. We got plenty of questions. We got a question about the potential for a bear market and or recession in the next presidential term, the downside of early retirement, some potential tax implications from the presidential election, the tax impact from 70 million baby boomers retiring in the coming years, and when to fill up your Roth buckets for retirement. Remember, email here, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com. Send us your email, send us your comments. Always glad to have them. Tons and tons of questions from people. We appreciate it. Today's Ask the Compound is sponsored by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and help lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was looking at mine today. It said, Ben, here's your upcoming subscriptions, and all of them are finance related. Barron's, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, I can't remember, a bunch of them. And I can look and say, do I really need that one anymore? Can I cancel this? But then I let Rocket Money do it for me. I don't need to think about it.
Nice.
They can be my negotiator. They can cancel for me. It's easy. 5 million users on Rocket Money have saved a total of $500 million. That's an average of $740 per user per year when using all the app's features. Stop using those unwanted things you don't use. Cancel unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/ATC. That's rocketmoney.com/ATC. I'm killing inflation here with Rocket Money.
Love Rocket Money.
All right. Duncan tells me we are in the need for a new video editor.
It's true, and not just an editor, ideally someone with some video production or film production experience. So we do it all here. We shoot things in person, and then we record things remote, we edit. So yeah, I need an all-around video and audio professional.
So what kind of background would that be? Where would they be coming from?
Well, I mean, me, Dan, and John all have film degrees, so that's a good place to start. If you went to film school or communications school and you're into finance, then yeah, hit me up. Email us at the email that we always share, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com.
There's no more good independent movies anymore, so if we have an idea for a script, I'd like to make a movie too, if we can fit that in.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
All right, let's do a question.
Okay, up first today we have a question from Twitter. Which presidential candidate is more likely to cause economic strife?
All right, this question obviously came in before we had the results of the election. We do. Listen, I would give the same answer regardless of who won. Okay? So let's look at, and I think this person was wondering about drawdowns and recessions, right? Which presidential candidate would cause more drawdowns and recessions? John, throw up the first chart here. This is a look back at presidential annual returns and then max drawdowns by presidents, going all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt. You can see that corrections do not discriminate by president. It's hard to pin down some relationship here. Obviously, some presidents had worse drawdowns than others. The 86% in the Great Depression, not great, obviously. Sorry, Herbert Hoover. I'm pretty confident we're going to have a big correction or bear market at some point over the next 4 years. Maybe we sidestep it, but the president can't stop the stock market from going down. It just happens. As far as recessions go, John, throw the next one up. We did this long-term chart of presidential terms. You can see on the line red and blue, and then the gray bars for recessions over the time. And you can see pre-World War II, there were way more recessions. So that's a big difference between lately. Obviously, I don't know. This is another one of those where you can't really tell unless you dig into the data a little more. So, John, let's do another one. And we looked at the number of recessions that are started under each individual type of party. And this one actually surprised me. Since 1900, there have been 18 recessions that have started under Republicans and 6 that have started under Democrats. Now, you look at that and you think, okay, Republicans are worse for the economy. John, you can do chart off now. I think that there's some context required here, though. I don't think this really tells us anything, because was Ronald Reagan an economic maestro back in the 1980s, or did he just happen to take over during a period of disinflation and falling rates after the 70s was a terrible decade? Was George H.W. Bush a terrible president and got voted out after one term because he was a bad president, or did his election year happen to fall within a slowdown in the U.S. economy? Was Bill Clinton like a savant with the economy, or did he happen to take over during a period of economic nirvana in the 90s with favorable demographics and the dot-com bubble to round out the decade? George W. Bush, was he terrible at the economy? Some would say maybe. I would say he probably took office coming out of a 2-decade-long bull market and walked it after two of the biggest bubbles we've ever seen in the country, in the stock market, in the dot-com bubble, and the housing bubble in the aughts. So, and were Obama and Trump masters of finance, or did they happen to take over after a lost decade during a period of low rates and a huge economic recovery? And then did Joe Biden push up the stock market and housing prices this decade, or did he happen to take over as president when we had this huge influx of government spending because of the pandemic?
It's kind of a choose your own adventure, right?
Yes. Now you could nitpick here and say, well, there's certain policies and decisions that were made or not made, and you can get into that stuff. My point is, this stuff is cyclical. In the timing of a president coming in, sometimes they're lucky or unlucky. It's kind of like investors when you come in. If you came in and started investing during the 80s, early 80s, you were at a great time. If you started investing in the year 2000, that's poor timing, right? So the question is Trump going to be lucky or unlucky in the next 4 years? And on the one hand, we've had exactly one recession in the past 15 years, and it lasted for 2 months in the pandemic. Not even a real recession, really. We kind of created it on our own. So you could say we're due for a recession, regardless of who is the president. Doesn't even matter. On the other hand, here's a look at the current setup that Trump is taking over in the economy. Unemployment rate at 4.1%, inflation rate 2.4%, probably continue to go down at least for a little bit. 10-year Treasury yield 4.4%, real GDP growth close to 3%. If there is such thing as a sweet spot for the U.S. economy, this is probably it. We're in it right now. Plus, you have the Fed in an easing cycle, lowering rates. Of course, that can't last forever. And then you say, well, what about the prospect of higher inflation if Trump is going to spend a bunch of money and he's going to put these tariffs through? But then you go, well, we just lived through a period of inflation and that didn't lead to recession. And so round and round you go, where you could talk yourself into anything. And I think if the last 3 years have taught us anything about the economy, it's that predicting recessions is hard. It's hard when you're using economic data. It's hard using the stock market. It's hard using the yield curve. It's hard using vibes. And it's hard when using politicians. So I think my take is recessions and bear markets are a feature of this system, and they're going to happen eventually. You have to take them into account for your investment plan, but you can't plan for them in advance. And I don't think the president is going to tell you one way or another whether one will hit or not.
It is interesting to see the price action today and all these stocks that are associated with, Trump one way or another. So Tesla, it's up big. All other EV stocks are hurting big time. Clean energy stocks are down big.
The fun part about this is that you know that there's some overreactions going on right now, but you just don't know where. We're going to talk about this more. We actually have a live episode of The Compound this afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about some of that stuff. But yeah, there are overreactions and first-order effects, but then second and third-order effects that you can't even tell right now. So it's always interesting. Like my favorite example is under Trump, energy stocks did terribly. And you'd think, well, he's a big, and then under Biden, energy stocks did really well. And so sometimes these things are counterintuitive and not what you think will happen.
Right. Yeah, that one's a shock to a lot of people. But yeah, buying gasoline and oil stocks did not work out for you, during the last Trump administration.
All right. Next question.
Okay. Up next, we have a question. You just put YouTube comment guy.
Yeah.
Great fire question, which the panel completely avoided and then went to the typical nonsense about, won't you be bored? Weird. The question didn't have anything to do with the person's retirement lifestyle, but you talked about that for 9 minutes. Can we answer the financial part of the question next time and not get the lecture about your opinions on retiring early? Fair.
Listen,
I mean,
fair enough. Hey,
fair.
listen, I'm a big boy. I can take, but so last week we had a question. Jill on Money was here, and we had a question from a guy who's 36 years old asking about Roth IRA conversions as he retires in his mid-30s. And we did go through some of the spreadsheet part of it, saying, it's kind of a trade-off. Do you want more liquidity now, or do you want more tax breaks in the future? And Jill and I went through that. But then we did spend the bulk of that question talking about what do you do if you retire early. And first of all, let's just get in the trust tree together, all the FIRE people. FIRE people can be a little sensitive about their lifestyle. because let's be honest, they catch a lot of flack from personal finance experts and others who go like, oh, I could have done what you did if I didn't have any kids, or I just didn't spend any money, or I worked in tech or whatever. But you didn't do those things, so people put them down, and I think there's some jealousy there. So I do think, I think the FIRE movement is a net positive. Like, maybe they take the frugality thing a little too far for my personal taste, but for them, whatever, teach their own. You do what you want.
Definitely beats the opposite, just like spending like crazy and running up a bunch of debt and being reckless.
Yeah, they have the right idea. Some people said, well, Ben, you're just a workaholic, which that is not true. I'm a huge fan of finding balance in one's life. I said I purchased a lake home in my late 30s because I wanted to have something of a mini retirement. I didn't want to wait till I was 65 to enjoy myself. I'm more of a proponent of balance. If you're not one of those people, that's fine.
When did you get the Tri-Tune?
2 years ago, maybe. Okay. Yeah. See, I'm basically retired already. I wanted a series of mini retirements so I could enjoy my time with my kids while they're young and they still want to hang out with me. So here's where I'm going to push back somewhat on these comments. So yes, spreadsheets and numbers stuff is important, but I think people, especially in the FIRE movement, can take the spreadsheet stuff way too far, and they don't spend enough time thinking through the emotional stuff. I've seen this stuff firsthand, and the research backs me up on it. People find a lot of meaning in their work, and it's not just the work itself. It's the relationships and the routines you create, and oftentimes, whether you retire in 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, taking that routine off the table can be a huge blow to your psyche. So there was a study that looked at employees who worked at Shell Oil, and they found that people who retired at age 55, they looked at thousands of employees over the years, people who retired at 55 doubled their risk for death before reaching age 65 versus those who retired after age 60. And mortality rates improved with older retirement age. And they think part of this is you stay more cognitively aware, you keep those relationships, and you have something to strive for. It actually can improve your health. So there's some more research from this book on the longest study on happiness ever. It's called The Good Life. I've referenced this one before. Highly recommend this book. And it says, here's what they found. Positive relationships at work lead to lower levels of stress, healthier workers, and fewer days off when we come home upset. They also simply make us happier. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have a good job to be happy, but it is true that people who are happy on the job and have these good relationships at work are actually tend to be happier in their life. Obviously, there are other ways to create relationships and stay cognitively engaged besides work. And I'm sure like the guy in question said, hey, listen, I have a lot of hobbies. And sure, I'm sure you do. I'm not saying you're going to be miserable automatically if you retire early. All I'm saying is you have to think through the psychological impact of retiring early and have that be part of your plan too. You can't just plan out your money. You have to plan out all the other stuff too, because I've seen way too many people, and this happens to people in their 60s too. They stop one day and they go, oh man, how many times can I actually golf and still be happy? Like I need something to do. So I think you have to focus more on the emotional stuff in addition to the spreadsheet stuff as well. Just consider that side of the equation because it could sneak up on you.
I think a lot of people that do this, they hate their jobs or hate their industries they work in, right? And so it's understandable. That's different than if you have a job that you enjoy, you like, you're good at, and you find it fulfilling, then of course maybe FIRE is not something that you're interested in pursuing. But yeah, if you hate your job and every day is a drag, then yeah, why wouldn't you want to try to retire?
And I understand that. And the point is, and guess what, if you retire, you can still find something else to do with your time, or maybe a different career path that you wanted to do, or something you don't even get paid for. You volunteer, whatever, but you have to have some sort of plan. That's my point.
Yeah. I think I'd be able to like run a 4-minute mile if I retired early. You know,
beer mile. Go for the beer mile if you're going to do it.
There you go.
All right. Next question.
Okay. Up next we have, regardless of who wins the election, tax rates will be different in the years ahead. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires at the end of 2025. So whoever wins...
TCGA, you nailed it, Duncan.
Yeah. I see. I know things. So whoever wins will be implementing some changes even if they do nothing. How do you prepare for uncertainty in tax rates like this? Anything you can do ahead of time to put yourself in a better position financially?
All right. Let's bring in a tax expert on this one. Bill number 2, Bill Artzerounian.
Hey, Bill.
What's up, guys?
Bill heads up our tax practice at RWM in the beautiful state of Pennsylvania. No one's been talking about that state lately. All right, Bill. So impossible to get clarity on this stuff for sure. I guess sometimes even after the tax bills have been passed, but what do you think about this? Like, let's say that the bill just gets extended, I guess, and status quo. What does that even mean?
I think that's our default right now, Ben, is an extension of TCGA. So the tax environment we've been living in since 2017, we expect, now that we have some results over the last, let's call it 12 hours, we expect that to continue. That would more than likely be a 7-year extension, just like the first bill, first tax change was 7 years. We expect 7 more. There could be some tinkers around the edges, but we think the core of that will likely stay the same. So no major changes. However, we don't know. And so for the last couple months, 2 years maybe, we've been answering this question from clients and taxpayers across the country. What should we do in advance of the election or after the election? And my response is always, don't try to front run this. Most tax changes go into effect for the future. And so you're able to plan ahead. There are some exceptions to that. Some of the COVID tax changes were retroactive, which drove us tax professionals kind of crazy. But oftentimes you can plan ahead. Once the law is enacted, there's some go time before anything gets put into place.
How long do they have to extend this? The end of next year?
It is set to expire as of December 31st, 2025. So the extension would need to happen before then. If it is not extended before that date, we revert back to 2017 tax law, which is slightly higher income tax rates, different set of deductions, different limits on deductions, a whole different corporate tax rate. So back to the Obama years of tax law.
For my friends on the coast, could we see the repeal of the SALT deduction?
We're skeptical, given we kind of expect now an extension. I did say they might tinker around the edges with this, and that's one area they could. I don't see a full repeal. Just where we are in America, I don't need to tell the audience that we're pretty divided politically, and that SALT repeal was very, very popular in the middle of the country, which is where a lot of the GOP represents their constituents. And so a full repeal, I'm pretty skeptical. I could see a world where they double it from $10,000 of SALT cap to $20,000. Yeah. And, that's not going to change your life, but it will help.
Sorry, I knew the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I don't know what SALT is. Can you do the cliff notes of that real fast? What is that?
Yeah, so on your federal tax return, Duncan, if you itemize your deductions, which usually requires a mortgage. If you don't have a mortgage, it's unlikely you're itemizing. But historically, you could deduct 100% of your state and local taxes that you pay. That is real estate taxes, state and local income taxes, stuff like that. As of TCJA, that was limited to $10,000. So the folks who were most affected by that were high income earners in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California.
So if you have that 7% mortgage, you're hoping for a little bit of a rise in that because you're probably paying higher interest costs there.
Well, the mortgage isn't capped based on SALT. SALT is real estate taxes and state income taxes. There is a different limit on the mortgage. There is a different mortgage limitation. Right now, you can only deduct mortgage interest on mortgage debt up to $750,000. Without the TCJA repeal or expiration, in theory, that could be up to $1 million after 2025.
See, that's why I let you guys do my taxes. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I think that's the biggest point is, lean on professionals, lean on a CFP who's doing tax planning, or lean on a tax professional, a CPA, an EA, because those are the folks that are, most in tune with what's current, and they're the ones that should be doing the forward-looking planning.
Yeah, even if there are some changes on the edges, you're probably not going to know what they are. You're going to need a tax professional to suss it out for you on the details.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess the big takeaway here is probably not broad changes.
I don't, based on what we've seen over the last 12 hours, I don't expect broad changes. I think we're probably going to be, in 2026, I think it's probably going to look a lot like 2024.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, another question.
Okay, and that one was from Andrew. Up next, we have one from Michael. Will there be any meaningful impact on the deficit as boomers start taking RMDs, regular withdrawals, and 10-year withdrawals from heirs when they pass away? I'm thinking there's a possibility that all of this kicking the can down the road was to wait for this moment. Will the greatest transfer of wealth be accompanied by a huge tax bill?
All right, I don't want to speculate on the macroeconomic impact of this, of the tax receipts. Just way too many variables at play, like when the money comes out or how much actually transfers. My whole thing, so a lot of people always ask us, like, are the baby boomers going to crash the stock market? And it was always hard for me to see that because, the top 10% owns 90% of the stock market. So I think most of this money is not going to be spent. It's going to be passed down or something. But there are 70 million baby boomers who are in retirement or reaching that age. And so I guess it's interesting to think about, like, what are the tax ramifications of this in the years ahead? Like, what are the biggest things to think about in retirement from a tax perspective? Right.
Yeah. And the crux here is that a lot of folks for decades, the baby boomers of the world, they've been saving in tax qualified retirement accounts for decades, IRAs and 401ks, 403bs, stuff like that. And at age 7, the current age is 73. It's going to be 75 in a couple of years. But the government basically says, you've deferred taxes for decades. Now you have to start taking money out of those accounts and pay taxes. Those are called required minimum distributions, and that's what the listener is getting at here. I think this is a micro solution to a larger macro problem, right? The micro is folks have to take money out of their retirement accounts and pay tax. The larger thing here is a huge macro deficit. I think this is kind of a drop in the bucket for the deficit. John, can you pull up the chart on, I should say? So this is a breakdown of retirement assets in the United States. It's about $40 trillion. Total assets in the United States are about 200 trillion. So we're talking about 1/5 of U.S. assets. Chart off, John. We're talking about 1/5 of U.S. assets are in these retirement vehicles. The thing is, it doesn't all happen at once. RMDs occur over the course of your lifetime. And so when you're 73, your first year RMD, it's less than 4% of your account value, right? So it's not this massive amount. This isn't all going to happen in a single year. And if, life expectancy is increasing across the globe, folks are living longer, and then they pass it on to their kids. And right now their kids have 10 years to take that money out. So yes, tax revenues will be affected, but I don't think it'll be material.
Yeah, it's a drop in the bucket, right? Like you said.
Yeah. Let's talk generally, Ben, on what we can expect in taxes in retirement. So most folks are earning in retirement Social Security income. They're drawing on these retirement accounts, and they might have a brokerage account that's paying interest and dividends. Retirement is a pretty good time to pay taxes. One, you've deferred for decades, so there's a time value of money to that deferral. And number two is, at certain income levels, Social Security could be not taxed at all, or it could be taxed at 50% or up to 85%. So dollar for dollar, you're never paying tax on 100% of your Social Security income. And then if you do have a brokerage account, long-term capital gains and qualified dividends could also be subject to a 0% tax rate. So
depending on how much you make, you can finagle it to pay very little in taxes in retirement.
And that might be a good outcome. It might also not be an optimal outcome. Paying zero in taxes sounds great, but there might be opportunity cost of paying zero in taxes. That might be an opportunity to complete like a Roth conversion. So you're taking some of this IRA money that's been deferred for years, and there might be a window in your life cycle where your income is really, really low, and that'd be a great time to convert your IRA money to a Roth IRA.
I like it. Double-edged sword. That makes sense. But again, to your point, not to toot your own horn here, but like I talked to a group of financial advisors today, and they're asking me some of the biggest challenges ahead for the financial advice industry. And I just said that there's probably going to be more demand for advice than there are people to take it, because for a lot of people, building the wealth is an easier process than taking it back out, right? And people are going to be in need for tax advice and insurance advice and estate planning advice, and they're going to need help spending this money or transferring it or whatever it is, and that's going to require more experts. We need more CPAs, Bill.
Do you think with Trump winning, is the IRS and our IRS agents going to increase or decrease?
Certainly not increase. Part of I forget which tax act it was. It was during Biden's term, but they added IRS agents to the tune of like 80,000. And it wasn't folks with guns running around auditing people. It was people just to answer the phone. So for CPAs like me, that was a big win, because now I can call the IRS and I can get someone's attention if a client has an issue. Prior to that, I have literal phone screenshots that have me on hold for over 2 hours. So it's a nightmare for me if the IRS is gutted, and that's based on a lot of the Trump rhetoric. I think that might be where we're heading. Not gutting it, but certainly reducing some of the inflow of money and support that the Biden administration provided.
Someone told me this morning they're going to think about not paying taxes anymore and just see what happens. Probably not a good strategy. We may or may not work with this person.
F
around and find out is what I'll say.
All right, we got one more question.
I remember the first time I went to Asheville, North Carolina, when I was in like high school. W. Bush was in office, and a lot of the stores around Asheville, like little, kind of mom and pop stores, said we don't charge tax because we don't believe in this, this government or this, this war or whatever. There were a bunch of different ones. I remember being like, that's the thing. You can not pay taxes. I don't think that works. But yeah.
All right, last question.
All right, last but not least, we have a question from Jeff. I'm an old guy looking to retire next year when I turn 64. I make about $100,000 a year, and I'd like to get as much money into my Roth account as possible for this last year of work. So here's my question. After the first of the year, do I max out my Roth 401k first, our Roth IRAs, or does it even matter? What happens if I max out my IRAs for my wife and I in January and then lose my job soon afterwards?
Does the timing really matter here?
Not really. I mean, Jeff's got the right idea. If he's slowing things down and he's approaching retirement, adding as much to a Roth account is going to be really strong for him long term. There is a little bit of minutia that says you don't want to contribute to an IRA before you know you have the earned income. You know, Jeff, based on his numbers here, he earns about $8,000 a month. The maximum IRA contribution next year for Jeff over age 65, it's going to be $8,000. So what I would tell Jeff is wait until the end of January until you're paid twice and you know you're employed through the month to make that IRA contribution, because it's a real pain to over contribute and not be allowed and then try to get that money out. It's formulaic. It's a nightmare. The other considerations on the 401k, and it's not so much your contribution, Jeff, but it's your employer match. If you think, if you stay employed for the full year or a partial year, some employers will not complete their full match on a big lump sum contribution. So if you max everything out in January in the 401k, which is going to be over $30,000, your employer might match whatever their match is. They might just do it for January, and they might not give you credit for the full contribution. Whereas if you do it evenly over a series of months or series of biweekly paychecks, you're going to get the full match that you're entitled to. So I'd be careful on the 401k in terms of the timing. And then on the IRA, I'd just make sure you have the earned income to make the contribution.
And to your earlier point, if he has some low income in the early years of retirement, he could continue filling up those Roth buckets if he wanted to with Roth conversions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's, take a drink if you were waiting for Roth conversion. That's number two. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the peak time to convert is, especially if he has like a partial year of earnings, that means his income on paper next year is going to be really, really low. And that would be the time to fill up those low tax brackets. Right now at the federal level, that's 10% and 12%. I'd be looking to fill those up with Roth conversions.
I guess getting back to our other point about complexity in retirement, having more Roth assets makes your life a little less complex in retirement, right? Because you just don't have to worry about it.
It certainly does. You don't have to worry about tax. You don't have to worry about gaming out, tax brackets and figuring out tax law. Like your Roth account's a Roth account. It's all going to be tax free as long as you meet the 5-year requirement. You have to contribute and wait 5 years before you can draw on the earnings. But it sounds like Jeff's been on this path for a while, so he should be okay.
Yeah, good question. All right.
All
Thanks
very
to Bill for coming
confusing.
on.
It's why I'm happy I have a tax genius doing my taxes.
There you go. I used to do it myself. No, my first tax return was over 15 years old, my first job. My father made me do it myself.
Was it handwritten?
Oh, yeah. Did it by hand.
When I was a freelancer years ago, I used to do TurboTax. It was my least favorite thing.
Yeah, it's all right. TurboTax is not going to put Bill out of a job. Bill, do we need more CPAs at Ritholtz Wealth Tax or not?
We do, always. If you're a CPA and you want to get into the world of investment management, financial planning, and also do really, really high-quality tax work, come talk to us.
Boom. All right. Remember, live at the compound tonight, 4 p.m. Eastern. Me, Josh, Michael, Callie. It's going to be fun. Email us, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com. See you next time.
See you, everyone.